So I want you to just picture your ideal classroom for a second.
Oh, that's a good starting point.
Right.
But
Like usually we think of these, engagement strategies, like tools that are specifically designed to take a really boring passive lecture and turn it into this exciting active learning environment.
yeah, lots of group work, kids talking to each other, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But what if those modern best practices, the ones designed to keep students engaged, are actually, traumatizing them?
It's a huge question, and it's exactly what we're getting into today.
Yeah, today we are taking a really deep dive into just one single source. It's a pretty challenging, deeply analytical article by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks.
Right, and it's called From Co-Creation to True Partnership, Building Inclusive Educational Spaces.
And just to give some background, Dr. Hoerricks holds a PhD and is a teacher in a heavily underfunded Title I school, right?
Yes. And they're writing from this very specific intersection. So it's special education, neurodivergent advocacy, and queer identity all coming together.
So our core mission for this deep dive is to basically deconstruct the common knowledge around classroom management, because the argument here is that true co-creation, like real partnership in a school, means we have to completely reimagine teachers, students, and families as equal partners.
And, dismantle all these systemic barriers along the way, which is not a small task.
Not at all. And we're going to talk a lot about these rigid engagement strategies, specifically Dr. Spencer Kagan's prompting systems, which are super popular.
Right, the Kagan structures.
Yeah. But before we get into the author's really intense critique of those structures, we need to set a quick ground rule for today's conversation.
Yeah, a quick disclaimer is definitely needed here.
Right. So this source material touches on some incredibly politically charged topics.
Very much so, including the dismantling of DEIB programs and, systemic bigotry.
Exactly. So we just want to be super clear to you, listening right now, we are not taking sides here.
Right. We aren't endorsing or condemning the author's political viewpoints.
No, our job is just to impartially unpack the lived experiences and the actual arguments presented in Dr. Hoerricks' text.
Exactly. We're just looking at how the author connects these macro-political ideas to the everyday reality of a classroom.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Let's move from that, idealized view of an engaged classroom to the actual reality of how teachers are forced to operate.
Yeah, and the article starts by tearing down what Dr. Hoerricks calls the service provider myth.
The service provider myth. So this is the idea that teachers are basically just delivery drivers, right?
Pretty much. It's this attitude that education is a supply chain. The state makes the curriculum, the board packages it, and the teacher just hands it to the kid.
Which is such a weird way to look at a human being whose job is to connect with children.
Right. But the author points out that when you view a teacher as just a conveyor belt for preset content, you are completely stripping away their autonomy.
Because a conveyor belt can't respond to how a student is feeling that day.
Exactly. And this is where Dr. Hoerricks really goes after those scripted engagement strategies we mentioned. The Kagan structures.
Yeah, because Kagan structures are marketed everywhere as like the ultimate foolproof way to get students to cooperate.
Oh, they are a massive industry. But Hoerricks does not hold back at all. The text calls them external, profit-driven initiatives.
And specifically calls them ableist and behaviorist, which is a huge claim. So let's break that down. What makes a learning game behaviorist?
Well, strict behaviorism basically just looks at observable inputs and outputs. It ignores the internal, cognitive or emotional state of the person.
So it's just about what you can see them doing.
Right. And a Kagan structure is essentially just a highly formalized behavioral script.
Can you give an example of how one actually works in a real classroom?
Yeah, so take one of the most common ones. It's called a timed pair share.
Okay.
So instead of the teacher just asking a question and letting the kids talk naturally, they start this really rigid sequence.
Like blowing a whistle kind of thing?
Kind of. Student A is given exactly 30 seconds to speak. Not 20, not 40, 30.
And what is student B doing?
Student B has to sit there, maintain direct eye contact, and remain totally, completely silent.
Oh, wow.
And then, when the timer goes off, student B can't just say, cool. They have to use a very specific, scripted affirmation.
Like, thank you for sharing your perspective. I found it interesting when you said X.
Literally exactly like that. And then they switch. So the whole focus of the exercise is just on absolute, observable compliance with the rules of the routine.
So the teacher is basically reduced to just standing there with a stopwatch.
Right, just monitoring the room to make sure everyone is physically performing engagement.
Okay, I kind of want to push back on that slightly, or at least play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
From an admin perspective, I can totally see why that is super appealing. I mean, if you have a room of 35 14-year-olds, organic conversation usually just turns into total chaos.
Oh, absolutely. It gets loud and messy.
Right, so this script guarantees that every kid speaks. It guarantees no one is just sitting in the back doing nothing. Isn't that structure like a net positive for a chaotic environment?
Well, that's exactly the administrative logic that drives millions of dollars in sales for these programs. It creates the illusion of a well-oiled
The
machine.
illusion of one, yeah.
But this is where the author's critique shifts into the reality of special education. The text explicitly calls these structures ableist.
Because they force everyone to act neurotypical.
Exactly. They mandate a singular, highly neurotypical performance of learning.
So, like, consider an autistic learner or a student with an emotional processing disability.
Right. The cognitive load for them to do a timed pair share is just astronomical.
Because they have to filter out the noise of 15 other conversations happening right next to them.
Yes. And they have to suppress any natural physical stimming just to maintain that forced, uninterrupted eye contact.
Which a lot of autistic individuals have reported is actually physically painful for them.
Or, at the very least, incredibly distracting. And they have to process the prompt, figure out an answer, and say it in exactly 30 seconds.
And if they fail to do any of that, like if they look away because the eye contact hurts or they just need a little longer to process their thought, the structure basically categorizes them as non-compliant.
Exactly. They aren't failing to learn the material, right? They're just failing to successfully mimic neurotypical behavior on command.
Wow. So they're literally being penalized for their neurology.
Yeah, and Hoerricks points out that forcing vulnerable students into these highly rigid, timed social interactions actively traumatizes them.
Because it teaches them that their natural way of existing is wrong.
Right. It tells them that survival in the classroom requires this intense, exhausting masking.
You know, it really sounds like treating education like a fast food franchise.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, like Kagan is this corporate manual, right? It ensures every single burger is flipped the exact same way at the exact same temperature no matter what location you're in.
Because the manual guarantees a uniform product.
Exactly. But a teacher shouldn't be a franchise line worker. They should actually be like a local chef trying to cook a meal that fits the specific needs of the people sitting at their table.
I love that analogy.
Because the fast food manual doesn't care if the customer has a severe gluten allergy, you know. It just demands that the burger comes on a bun because that's what page 4 of the binder says.
And the consequences of forcing that fast food model onto a classroom are just profound.
Because you can't have a partnership with a student if your only job is enforcing a stopwatch.
Right. If you're mandated to stick to the corporate manual, you are explicitly forbidden from co-creating a space. True partnership means you have to be able to see a student struggling and immediately abandon the plan to help them.
Which is such a great point, and I want to ask you listening right now to just reflect on your own workplace or learning environment for a second.
Yeah, it applies everywhere.
How often are these so-called best practice routines actually just compliance mechanisms that completely strip away all human connection?
It's a pretty sobering thought.
It really is. But this whole idea of disconnecting teachers from their students extends way past the 4 walls of the classroom in this article.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Hoerricks makes this fascinating pivot.
Yeah, connecting the loss of a teacher's autonomy inside the school to the loss of their connection to the community outside of it.
Because if teachers are supposed to be community members, why are they so disconnected?
Exactly. And the text uses a really stark economic reality to show this.
Right. So Dr. Hoerricks works in a titleized school. And just for context, that means the school gets supplemental federal funding because it serves a high percentage of low-income families.
But the author notes that their specific district actually offers some of the highest teacher salaries in the county.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a huge win for equity, right? A well-paid teacher in a high-need district.
But the reality on the ground completely shatters that. Because despite that supposedly high salary, the author literally cannot afford to live anywhere near the economically disadvantaged community where they teach.
Yeah, the math is just broken. And the text explains exactly why.
It's about property taxes, right?
Exactly. School budgets are tied to local property taxes. But in areas with heavy commercial use or corporate rental conglomerates, the tax structure is incredibly skewed.
Because these commercial properties get massive tax breaks or lower assessments compared to regular homeowners, So the local municipality is basically starving its own tax base to give corporate landlords a pass, which directly cripples the school funding.
Yes. And on top of that, those same rental conglomerates drive the local housing costs through the roof.
So the teachers are completely priced out of the very neighborhoods that are supposedly too poor to fund their own schools.
It's a vicious cycle. And the practical impact of this on the author's daily life is just staggering.
Yeah, the commute. Let's talk about the commute. The numbers here are just brutal.
Dr. Hoerricks commutes 81 miles to get to their classroom.
Each way.
Each way.
That is 81 miles there and 81 miles back. In a major metropolitan area, that's what, 2 to 3 hours in the car each way?
Easily. You're looking at 4 to 6 hours of driving every single workday.
So if a teacher has to be at school by 7:30 in the morning, they are waking up at like 4:30 a.m. They're leaving in the pitch dark.
And if they stay after school to grade or go to a meeting, they aren't pulling into their driveway until 7 or 8 at night.
The physical and emotional toll of that is just wild. It completely prevents them from doing anything in the community after hours.
Which destroys the whole premise of partnership.
Right. It's like a commuter marriage.
A commuter marriage.
Yeah, imagine you're trying to build this deep, intimate trust with your partner. Right. But you're only allowed to see each other during strict business hours.
Under fluorescent lights.
Exactly. How can a teacher be a real partner to a family if they literally never run into them at the local grocery store? If they never go to the Friday night football game?
They can't. They just remain this visiting service provider dropping in from 81 miles away.
And when a school is entirely staffed by commuters, they don't have that organic foundation.
Which is why they are forced to rely on those artificial Kagan structures.
Right.
Because they don't have the natural relationship capital to engage students authentically.
It all connects. So how do we fix it? We can't just magically lower rent overnight.
Well, the author actually points out a very specific, actionable solution right there in California.
Okay, what is it?
California school districts apparently have the legal right to convert district-owned properties into affordable housing specifically for their employees.
Wait, really?
Yes. And Dr. Hoerricks notes there are literally vacant lots, just a short bike ride from their school that the district already owns.
So the district owns the land and employs the teachers, but they just let the lots sit empty while their staff drives 4 hours a day.
Exactly. Converting that land would permanently embed the teachers into the neighborhood. They'd share the same economy and struggles as the families they serve.
Which is a huge physical step toward partnership. But the article makes a pretty sharp turn here.
Yeah, it does.
Because even if you fix the physical absence, even if everyone is in the exact same building partnership, is impossible if people are emotionally absent.
Right. And the text emphasizes that you can't have true co-creation unless marginalized voices are actively centered and amplified.
Specifically highlighting the LGBTQIA+ and disabled communities in the school.
But the reality is that those voices are often actively silenced.
Yeah, and the author tells this incredibly illustrative story about the school's Pride Club.
So Dr. Hoerricks used to be the faculty sponsor for this club, but recently it just wasn't reestablished.
And the official reason the school gave was a lack of interest.
Which is such a brilliant piece of bureaucratic plausible deniability.
Because it completely shifts the blame onto the students, right? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, we tried, but they just didn't care enough to show up.
Exactly. It relabels a systemic failure as student apathy. But Dr. Hoerricks actually spoke privately with the students to find out the real reason.
And it had absolutely nothing to do with apathy.
No, it was fear. The students were terrified.
The text reveals there was this heavy, completely unchecked bullying happening in the hallways.
Targeting LGBTQIA plus individuals. And the administration was showing a profound lack of visible support. They were just letting it happen.
So if you're a student in that environment, why on earth would you put your name on a public sign-up sheet for a Pride Club?
You wouldn't. It's painting a target on your own back. Withdrawing from the club was a survival mechanism, not apathy.
And when an administration allows that bullying to go unchecked, they are sending a really clear signal, aren't they?
They're telling those kids, this is not a safe space for you and we won't protect you.
Which brings us back to the classroom engagement piece. I mean, think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right. Safety is at the very bottom.
Exactly. If you're a student whose primary objective of the day is basic survival and just avoiding harassment in the hall, how on earth are you supposed to care about co-creating a lesson plan?
You can't. Your cognitive load is completely consumed by constant vigilance.
You literally don't have the bandwidth to care about a cooperative learning game.
Especially if you might have to play it with a kid who was just harassing you 5 minutes ago.
Partnership is just impossible without trust and safety. And, the burden of this hostility isn't just on the kids.
No, the conversation really shifts here to the adult dynamics in the building.
Yeah, Dr. Hoerricks shares their own personal experience as a queer trans teacher.
And it's very revealing about the current political climate surrounding diversity initiatives.
The author talks about life before they came out publicly. They noted that colleagues and students would often assume they were a safe audience for openly bigoted views.
Which is such a disturbing social mechanism. People just assume, based on how you look, that you share their prejudices.
So they just openly say homophobic or transphobic things, expecting you to silently agree.
Right. But then, the text notes that after Dr. Hoerricks did come out, several faculty members completely severed their professional relationships with them.
Instead of confronting their own biases, they just chose to isolate their colleague.
Which brings us to the author's stance on the wider political climate.
Right. And just as a reminder to you listening, we are impartially reporting the author's arguments here.
Yes. So the author argues that the current regime, as they call it in the text, is deliberately dismantling diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging programs.
The DEIB programs. And the author's argument is that this isn't just budget cuts, it's a calculated move to normalize exclusion.
Right, to actively silence marginalized groups.
But what's really interesting is that Dr. Hoerricks doesn't just blindly defend all DEIB programs.
No, they have a massive critique of how schools actually handle mandatory professional development.
Oh man, the mandatory PD. Anyone who works in a corporate or educational setting knows exactly what this is.
The scripted PowerPoint presentations at faculty meetings.
Right, you sit in a cafeteria, an admin reads bullet points about tolerance for 45 minutes, you sign a sheet, and nothing changes.
Because a scripted presentation doesn't fix deep-seated bigotry.
It's just compliance.
Exactly. The author says real change requires deep self-reflection. You have to actively recognize other people as fully complex humans.
Which is why the author frames centering marginalized voices as an act of resistance.
Right. But true partnership requires recognizing that complex humanity at the most fundamental level of interaction.
Which brings us to arguably the simplest interaction of all, what we call each other.
The linguistics of respect.
Yeah. The text points out that students frequently default to these binary, generic titles.
Like Mr. or Miss.
Right. They don't even learn the teacher's name sometimes. They just yell Mr. across the room.
It completely reduces the adult to an archetype. But for Dr. Hoerricks, this default language creates a huge conflict.
Because Dr. Hoerricks asks to be called doctor.
Right, which reflects both their earned PhD and serves as a gender-neutral alternative to their non-binary identity.
But the text notes that the students actively resist this. They call the author bougie for wanting to be called doctor.
Which is fascinating.
Let me play devil's advocate again here, because I think a listener might hear this and think, wait, isn't insisting on doctor in a high school just kind of an ego thing?
Right, like an academic superiority complex.
Yeah, exactly. Like the kids are calling it bougie because they think the teacher is just being elitist. But let's unpack this. Because it's not actually about the diploma at all.
No, it's about the students holding on to rigid binary expectations.
Right. The students don't have the vocabulary to process gender nonconformity in an authority figure.
So their linguistic framework basically glitches.
And they reach for class warfare instead, accusing the teacher of being bougie because they're completely stripping the teacher of their non-binary identity.
It's forcing a square peg into a round hole and then getting mad at the peg for not fitting.
Exactly. And this dynamic reveals a massive cultural roadblock. If a student stubbornly refuses to see a teacher as a full individual, if they can't even recognize their basic identity, they literally cannot partner with them.
You can't co-create a learning space with someone you refuse to see.
But here is the real kicker of this whole article. Even if you get past the linguistics and the bullying and everyone genuinely wants to connect, the system itself doesn't give them the time to do it.
Yeah, we have to look at the institutional inertia.
The systemic roadblocks that force teachers and students to spend their time doing other things.
And the big ones identified here are standardized testing and pacing guides.
They just destroy any chance at flexibility. The text notes that in the spring term alone, this school faces at least one major state or district-mandated test every single month.
Every single month. The logistics of that are suffocating.
You have to change the bell schedule, prep the kids, administer the test. It's just endless triage.
And then you add the pacing guide on top of that.
Which is basically a calendar telling the teacher exactly what page of the textbook they have to be on every single day.
Right. So if the kids are having an amazing, deep discussion about something on Tuesday, but the guide says you have to move on by Wednesday.
You just kill the discussion.
You have to. Compliance over connection.
And compounding all of this manufactured stress is actual economic scarcity.
Yeah, the budget cuts are devastating. The author points out that next year, their Title I school is losing critical staff.
Specifically, they are losing a dedicated psychiatric social worker and a counselor. Imagine your own job, right? If your company fired the entire IT department and the entire HR department,
Oh, wow.
and then told you that you also have to undergo a massive, high-stakes audit every single month, how much creative co-creation would you be getting done?
None. Zero. You'd just be in pure survival mode.
Exactly. When a school loses its mental health staff, all those crises don't just disappear, they fall onto the teachers.
The same teachers who are commuting 81 miles and dealing with unchecked bullying, they're forced into crisis management, and the space for innovation just vanishes.
It's incredibly heavy. But we should pivot here because the article doesn't end in total despair.
No, Dr. Hoerricks actually proposes some really strong, actionable frameworks for true partnership.
Like actual solutions for getting past all these barriers.
Right. And one of the biggest ones is the collaborative adaptation of mandated curricula.
So still meeting state standards, but changing how you do it.
Exactly. The author specifically mentions a framework called Understanding by Design, or UBD.
Okay, how does UBD actually work in this context?
Well, it supports true partnership because it offers structure to maintain rigor, but it still allows for massive responsiveness and creativity.
So instead of just following a script page by page, you start with the end goal and map the journey together with the students.
Pretty much. You define the essential understanding first, but the path to get there is flexible enough to respond to the student's actual lived experiences.
That makes so much sense. And the text also talks about co-creating classroom norms at the start of the year, right?
Yes. Shifting the culture from the very first day to prioritize relational trust over compliance.
So letting the kids help write the rules.
Yes, which makes some administrators very nervous.
Yeah, I can hear the pushback now. Does inviting students to co-create norms mean the kids are just running the show?
But it's not anarchy.
Right. Actually, it's more like drawing up a roommate agreement on day one of college.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know, you aren't giving up your authority in the apartment. You're just establishing mutual buy-in. Hey, let's agree to do the dishes on Tuesday so we don't kill each other.
Right.
You set it up early so you don't have to police the kitchen sink for the next 9 months. It's about shared ownership.
Exactly. When students own the norms, they police themselves. But again, you can't do that if you don't have affordable housing for teachers, or if the system is enforcing ableist structures.
It all weaves together. True partnership isn't just buying a new seating arrangement or a Kagan prompting routine.
No, it is a fundamental cultural shift.
It requires local housing, abolishing those rigid compliance models, defying systemic bigotry, and actually seeing both students and teachers as complex humans.
It's massive structural change.
And this is so relevant to you listening, whether you're a parent, a student, or just a taxpayer. The way we structure our schools directly dictates the kind of society we are building. We have to decide. Are we funding compliance factories? Or are we building incubators for empathy and partnership?
And just to leave the listener with a final, really provocative thought to mull over,
Let's hear it.
Dr. Hoerricks mentioned using those vacant lots to house teachers, right?
Yeah, the affordable housing idea?
Well, think about this. If we actually did that, if every teacher lived directly next door to the families they served, sharing the exact same local economy, the exact same local struggles,
Yeah.
would those state-level mandates and monthly standardized tests even survive?
Oh, wow.
Or would deeply embedded, localized teacher-parent alliances become simply too powerful for distant bureaucracies to control?
That is a wild thought. Just a massive, hyper-local voting bloc that refuses to comply with bad mandates.
Exactly. Partnership is power.
Well, that is definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep exploring the realities of the spaces around you, and we'll catch you next time.